Welcome to Virtues and Vocations, conversations on character and the common good. This series is part of Virtues and Vocations, a national forum housed at the Institute for Social Concerns at the University of Notre Dame and funded by the Kern Family Foundation. Virtues and Vocations seeks to foster a community of practice among scholars and practitioners across disciplines who are keen to understand how best to cultivate character and moral purpose in higher education and the professions. This webinar series is one way we facilitate these conversations. I am Suzanne Shanahan, and I direct the Institute for Social Concerns, and am host of this series. Today, we have a very special webinar where we welcome two authors from our most recent publication at Virtues and Vocations, a crossover event, if you will. Our conversation will run till about 12:40, and then we'll open it up for your questions. You can submit a question through the Q&A mechanism at any time, and I'll post them at the appointed time. Before we jump into today's conversation, I did want to acknowledge the sad passing of Pope Francis, a virtuous exemplar, especially in his service to justice at the margins. May he rest in peace. Today, we are excited to welcome Drs. Dana Cunningham and Jed Atkins. Dana Cunningham is the Pierre and Pamela Omidyar of the Jonathan M. Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts University. With a background in civil rights law and community development, she previously worked as an associate director at the Rockefeller Foundation, and before that, as a voting rights lawyer with the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Dana has dedicated her career to fostering civic engagement and co-creating knowledge with communities to address pressing societal challenges. Jed Atkins is the inaugural director and dean of the School of Civic Life and Leadership at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Formerly the E. Blake Byrne Associate Professor of Classical Studies at Duke University, he is an expert in Greek and Roman political and moral philosophy and a leading voice in contemporary conversations on civil discourse and civic education. Cunningham and Atkins each wrote essays on civic virtue for the spring issue of Virtues and Vocations magazine, wherein they help us to consider how we ought to educate for a civil, free, and just democratic society. Welcome. And it seems that Dana is delayed, so we're going to kick this off with Jed. Welcome, Jed. Wonderful to have you with us.
Well, it's great to be here, Suzanne, and to be able to join you in this particular venue. I enjoyed being your colleague at a previous institution and looking forward to carrying on the conversation now.
Wonderful. Great to have you here. So I would love to start with you reflecting a bit on what brought you to this moment, both in your current work as dean, but also how you came to an interest in civil discourse, civic education. Did you grow up a small child reading Cicero? What sort of sparked it for you in particular?
Really, my freshman year of college is what sparked this interest. Suzanne, I'm from the working class in central Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania. My dad was HVAC technician at Penn State University, first in my household to graduate from college. Went to Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine, a wonderful liberal arts college. And in the early 2000s, there were very few first-generation college students at Bowdoin at the time. Most of my classmates came from communities that had very different outlooks on the world than the one from which I came. And I quickly became aware of the extent of differences between the different communities that make up our country. And I remember being home on winter break after that first semester and having a conversation with one of my best friends from childhood. And I remember him saying, what are you doing up there with those puppies? You belong here with us. And so I began to wrestle, even my freshman year of college, with a liberal arts education like the one I'm receiving at Bowdoin? And in what way could it lead to benefits for civil discourse and conversations across difference? I ended up writing my senior honors thesis, taking up these questions about how people with incompatible views about religious, political, and moral goods can still live together. And that project actually was something I've thought about for a long time, and I returned to that subject in a book that came out with Oxford in the fall, The Christian Origins of Tolerance. But in the interim, between my freshman year and the book that just came out from Oxford, I was fortunate enough to land a job at Duke. And there I taught courses in democracy and the history of liberty and equality and political theory. And around 2014 to 2015, I noticed that it became harder for students to have open civil conversations about the types of subjects we talk about in a course on liberty and equality and Greek, Roman, and American political philosophy. And so I started experimenting. I got a grant to be able to bring in speakers with diverse political viewpoints into the classroom, and also to bring students outside of the classroom to have meals with each other and with these speakers. It started to make a difference. That led me to take part in starting a program at Duke called Transformative Ideas, a sophomore program that invited students to ask big questions about human and civic flourishing and to do that in a civil discourse community. That began to go well. Last fall, we enrolled 1/5 of the sophomore class. And I also directed the Duke Civil Discourse Project, which exported a course taught by John Rose, uh, um, how to think in an age of political polarization across the country. And the success there led me to come here to North Carolina and start the school to be the inaugural dean of the School of Civic Life and Leadership, where my faculty and I have been working to try to provide a world-class school for civic education inside of our nation's first public university.
Great. So, um, one of the things as I was reflecting on the beautiful essay that you wrote for the magazine, I was reflecting on, Brait, as a former Duke faculty member, the work of Stanley Fish. And as you know, I'm not a fan of the kind of teaching that you do, especially virtue-based teaching. And there's a piece from a 2008 bit he wrote where he says, no doubt, the practices of responsible citizenship and moral behavior should be encouraged in our young adults, but it is not the business of the university to do so, except when the morality in question is the morality that penalizes plagiarizing, cheating, and shoddy teaching, and the desired citizenship is not defined by the demands of democracy, but by the demands of the academy. And when I think about your work, really beginning with your senior thesis to this moment as inaugural dean, it's been quite the opposite of that. And I wonder if you might share a little bit about the points you're trying to make, drawing on this long philosophical tradition to get to this point to encourage civil dialogue as a core element of what we do in a liberal education.
Yeah. Well, I think you got to begin with the ends of the university, and one of those ends, a very important end and foundational end, is truth seeking. The uh, a type of community in which we invite its members to ask really important questions of human investigation, questions such as, what is the good society? What is the human person? How do we think about God or the gods and transcendence? How do we think about the cosmos and the natural world? And these questions are questions that, in maybe everyday life, we don't have an opportunity to think about. But with a liberal education, we're afforded the opportunity to step back for a period of years and to reflect on these ideas. And the questions that we're asked about don't have any easy answers. And that invites us into conversation and dialogue. And so I think that the type of dialogue and conversation that invites different perspectives in the shared pursuit of truth and the production of knowledge is at the heart of the university, but also something that requires civil discourse. And by that, what I mean is conversation among members of a shared community, the university community in the sense of the university, but also within our country, within a political community. And I think one of the things that the university can do through the shared pursuit of truth and knowledge is it can provide, you might say, a type of training ground so that when our graduates go out into the world, they're able to have the capacities and the experience to be able to have conversations across difference. I do try to connect the civil discourse in the essay with the liberal education. And the idea that I use is play, a type of intellectual play. And the idea there is play is a deeply human good. It's something that we all need to live a flourishing life. Thinkers as different from Plato and Martha Nussbaum and Robert Bellah have all argued that play is a fundamental human good. And play itself then is a very serious thing because without play we don't develop as human beings. And so the idea there with focusing this around play is it focuses on us having a shared enterprise. It helps us think about the skills or capacities that we need to play better, things like patience or humility and charity as we explore ideas together. There's also an idea which I thought was really interesting, the idea of reciprocity, which Robert Bellah emphasizes in his book about play through evolutionary biology, that wild animals, when they play, the dominant partner will restrain themselves to allow for mutuality, which of course is very important when you have a shared intellectual inquiry, that everybody is able to participate as equal partners. And then also a way to in some ways limit harm as a notion that in its most expansive sense can be used to shut down conversations, just to think about harm and injury in the sense of play. And so I use the metaphor of basketball, which is an imperfect metaphor. But given that I used to teach at Duke and now teaching at Carolina, that seemed to be the right metaphor to use. And it suggests a way in which a liberal arts education might combat things like risk aversion and fragility and pre-professionalism, the type of things that can shut down civil discourse. And one final thing I'll say about this is you might suppose, and this is, I've tried this out at a number of faculty seminars and in other forums, and one question I get is, well, given the challenges of democracy, surely we don't have time for something like to play with ideas about the big questions that liberal arts are doing. Yet I would contend that the development of imagination, which is what this liberal arts pursuit, where we're grappling with and wrestling with and playing with ideas, requires, developing that imagination, developing the capacities to think with others from different backgrounds, and awareness of the positions that others are taking and coming from, is exactly the kind of thing that we need to move forward with entrepreneurship, medicine, technology, and all the vocations that you talk about for virtues and vocations. And I think at a time when we think about one of the challenges to our democracy, you might say is a deficit of moral and political imagination. I think this type of idea of classical liberal education and emphasizes intellectual play is a very important resource.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, one of the sort of facts that you begin with is you had engaged in an effort for incoming North Carolina students where there was some sort of dimension of orientation that was around civic education and civil dialogue, and that you found that many students are eager to do this work but don't feel they have the ability. What does that mean concretely? How do we not have this ability, and how would we get from this deficit to actually cultivating it in our students and amongst ourselves for that matter?
Well, let me begin by talking a little bit more about the basketball metaphor and what work that is doing. The basketball metaphor presupposes and implies that none of us, when we're learning a sport like basketball, learn how to know, come into this world knowing how to dribble a basketball and how to pass and how to run plays. In fact, as we learn, we often will make mistakes. We'll get things wrong. We'll commit fouls. We'll do things that are embarrassing. We won't quite know the rules. will be awkward. But through playing and engaging and taking part in that activity, we begin to grow in our skills and capacities and knowledge about how to play the game of basketball better. And civil discourse is similar, that we, don't come into this world necessarily knowing how to have conversations about important questions with those who are different from us. We when we depending on our different personalities and different inclinations, we may err in different ways. We'll get things wrong, we'll make mistakes, we'll do things that are awkward, and so very similarly, there has to be experience and there has to be training, education, and there has to be opportunities to be able to grow in working out problems with other people. And so, and actually, I'm not surprised at all to find that when students are coming into places like Carolina, places like Duke, places like Notre Dame, places like Tufts, that they don't have these capacities because if there's not an effort to develop them. And so what we're finding from students when we did the exit surveys for the first year orientation program on civil discourse and academic freedom in the university is what we found is students had a great desire to engage in conversations across difference as part of learning about the world and learning about each other, but they just haven't had that experience or that practice in their high school classes. And so what that means is it means that universities have a really important role, I think, to play. That we have, I mean, it's good news. It means that our students are hungry to have these conversations, to grow as citizens who can speak across differences together and are eager to be able to take classes that do so. So we have a real opportunity to provide both work in the classrooms and public-facing events, speaker series, as well as in the residential life work that my team and I have done both at Duke and Carolina, partnering with Residential Life to have civil discourse communities in the dorms. These are in the residential halls. These are opportunities to be able to take the practice not just in the classroom, but bring it into other parts of students' life so they can begin to develop a culture of having conversations across difference and grow together. The same way in basketball, you have your practices on the court, out of the court, and then you also hang out with your teammates outside of the locker room to begin to build that camaraderie. So I think universities have a great opportunity to become engines and vehicles of promoting civic education that fosters civil discourse. I also think at public universities, such as the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, we also have a great opportunity to begin to think in K through 12 and what are the opportunities that we're able to provide and resources for, let's say, high school civic teachers to begin to promote these types of habits and patterns of thought and practice so that when students come to university, they don't have this deficit, right, as far as experience. Yeah, of course, one of the great things about the university, though, is the great diversity of students and backgrounds that come to the table here. So at Carolina, we have students that come from all 100 counties in North Carolina, which means we have great diversity, socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, religious diversity. The views of America being a purple state are represented at Carolina, and the views of our state represented at the university. So we really do have a great opportunity for our students to learn and grow and having conversations across difference, even as they seek the truth and knowledge together.
So one of the things that I thought was very interesting about your piece is, and I think it relates to your sort of own realization in 2015 that suddenly people weren't kind of digging in and having these conversations across difference, across different ideas, experiences, etc. That you talk about the things that make this challenging in the current moment for students. I wonder if you could share a little bit about what you think those things are and why you think they're inhibiting students who are coming to places like Notre Dame or North Carolina from having these important conversations.
It's a great question, and I'm going to qualify this question by saying that I'm going to be speaking in particular in my answering this about certain types of institutions, like flagship state universities and private universities. You might say Ivy pluses of places like Notre Dame and Duke. And I have that caveat because this way of framing things have come out of a lot of conversations in doing something that a colleague of mine, John Rose, who was at Duke, now at Carolina, is a professor here, has done for a number of years, which is we would have uh, a program in the summer to help educate and equip faculty from around the country to teach courses uh, that help students disagree better, to help have those dialogues across difference. And along with John, we've had a number of wonderful co-conveners, people like Teresa Bejan from Oxford and Deandra Rose of Duke, and on the list goes. And so for having these conversations, we've had faculty from I think 70 different institutions. So we had people from, red states, blue states, public, private, community colleges, religious universities. And one thing we found is that the pressure points and the challenges will look a little different depending on the institutions. But that said, for the majority of our faculty, for the majority of institutions, report saying something which were like the flagship state universities and the private, these were the challenges. And so the first challenge is a type of pre-professionalism, a type of pre-professionalism that rewards career success and penalizes risk-taking. And that risk-taking might have to do with the type of major you take, but it also might be the type of questions that you ask. You want to be safe and say the right thing, the safe thing. You don't want to say something that may be risky, that, I don't know, maybe you're worried about your grade, maybe you're worried about what other students might think about you. So you might be incentivized to play it safe. So that's one thing I think that's really important. Deresiewicz in his book Excellent Sheep uses that metaphor that you're educating people to succeed professionally, and that minimizes and doesn't reward risk taking. The second big thing is a type of understanding called you might say safetyism. Lukyanov and Haidt talk about this in their book The Calling of the American Mind. That sort of takes the idea of wanting to be safe and protective from the playground in the 80s and the 90s into colleges. And so again, it will minimize the type of risks students are taking inside the classroom, but also outside of the classroom, the types of things that they're willing to do to explore imaginative play. And then the last type of challenge is a type of challenge that then has a type of concept creep with respect to things like trauma, in which go from an objective medical term to a subjective experience, in which case then students find themselves in the classroom saying, well, this makes me uncomfortable, I've had this uncomfortable experience, therefore, I can't engage in this conversation. Maybe the rest shouldn't engage in this conversation either. So I think those are the three biggest challenges. And my essay tries to provide a framework to try to meet all of those challenges. And with the idea of intellectual play, you have an idea of pushing back on risk taking, the idea of trying to take intellectual risks to find the truth. You can use some mechanisms as well to be able to help, some very practical things like, in classes, asking students to abide by Chatham House rules, such that what is said in the classroom stays in the classroom. You can attribute specific comments to particular people, and that can make students feel a sense of security and trust with one another. And then there's also ways to kindle the imagination. Sometimes I get students to play with ideas by getting them first to physically play. So I took the students for a number of years, my team of faculty, I took students to the mountains of Montreat, Black Mountain, for a tech-free retreat, getting the students again to learn to play with one another, to kindle the imagination, and then move back into the classroom where they can then take those friendships that they've developed, the imagination that they've kindled, world into the classroom. And that's, again, a way to overcome safetyism and risk. And then a basketball metaphor, the idea of play and injury, in which the goal is, if you get injured, not to shut the game down, but to get back in the game. That can be very, very helpful for helping to frame to students what they're doing in ways that speak to them and also give them a reason and a framework for engaging and having conversations across difference.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. As you were discussing, I sort of bring myself back to the notion that um, part of the challenge seems not just on the student end, but really on the faculty end, that there was this sort of decline in these kinds of conversations that you yourself noted at Duke. Um, and it does seem that faculty are often uncomfortable creating spaces that enable those conversations, that maybe they don't feel that they have the skills or ability, or um, their own sense of virtue may be lacking to how to do this. And so how is it that you kind of empower, engage faculty so they feel comfortable having these conversations with students and they feel that it can be productive? Because I would imagine a lot of faculty feel, well, I would love to be able to do that, but I don't want it to go south. I don't want people who are taking a risk to feel it wasn't worth it or it didn't turn out the way we had hoped.
Yeah. Well, that is a concern that a lot of faculty have, and it's a justifiable concern because I love my graduate education at Cambridge. It was a first-rate graduate education, but I never had Civil Discourse 500 or teaching challenging conversations in Classroom 500, and that's the same as all the faculty. Because so far as I know, there's not graduate seminars that do that. Now, I think that's could be a great thing for a graduate program to start having, right? And think about how to educate our graduate students and how to mentor our TAs. Uh, but uh, but so it's a challenge, and so the summer faculty teaching civil discourse seminar came out of exactly these questions that faculty were having. My colleague John Rose wrote an essay in the Wall Street Journal. How I liberated my college classroom, I think, was the title that the article was published under, and started getting a lot of requests from faculty around the country saying, hey, I'd love to be able to teach courses that help our students learn to disagree more productively about difficult questions. But what do I put on the syllabus? But what do I do if something goes wrong and the conversation goes off the rails? How do I recover? How do I know if my chair or dean is supportive and I have that institutional support? So the faculty seminar that was funded with the generous support of the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation was an attempt to remedy and address all of these challenges. So when the faculty were recruited, we got support from the chair or dean that they would be able to teach a course on civil discourse in their own design in the next 3 semesters. Part of coming was to have a number of models of syllabi that we collected from some of the most successful practitioners around the country, John's, but certainly others, so that you'd have some concrete models. Here's some readings that you're able to put. Here are some topics that were discussed. And then third, a really kind of nuts and bolts sort of best practices part of the workshop. And then the fourth thing, which you didn't mention and which wasn't mentioned from the initial faculty, but which has come out of this, is an important part of a community of practitioners and a network of people that are working at very different institutions, which may have different challenges and different types of student bodies, maybe from very different political backgrounds, disciplinary backgrounds, but are committed to teaching courses on civil discourse that are going to help our students disagree productively. And they have each other's back, they support each other, they share notes, they begin to network and to be able to collaborate on projects that go even above and beyond even that summer seminar. And so when you begin to have a community of people that support one another through all the challenges, and this is challenging work. It's much well, it's much easier perhaps just to go in your classroom and teach and stay away from the challenging conversations. But it's not as enjoyable, I don't think, and it's not as rewarding. And so being able to support each other is huge. So this is what the summer seminars were designed to achieve, and I think very successfully have achieved. Like I said, we have 85 different faculty that have gone through them over the last few summers from 70 different institutions who are now teaching courses, and we have had other partnerships among contributors that have come out of these summer seminars. And I think that's one way to sort of scale this work and to enable it to reach as many universities and colleges across our country as possible. And then, it's also important too to be able to give faculty the freedom to be able to move into their own different places and institutional homes and adapt it to their local setting, right? And so this is all about giving agency to faculty to be able to do this work in their own particular contexts.
So that's great. I love this model of sort of training people to bring it back to their university. Sort of two questions emerge for me. One is, you talk about the virtues of civil dialogue as humility, trust, patience, and charity. Um, do the folks doing this work with their students also need to be exemplars in those virtues in the classroom? I'm thinking we do these workshops on integrating virtue into various syllabi and courses here at Notre Dame. And one of our colleagues said, you can't cultivate virtue if you're, not a good person. To what extent is that important in the model that you're describing?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, one of the most pleasant surprises of these faculty summer seminars is seeing the faculty who participated in our own conversations within the seminar exhibit these virtues towards one another and practice them, because and we didn't know how that was going to go when we started planning them, because we did have a diverse set of faculty, diverse institutions, diverse views, and and even in some cases the co-leads have very different perspectives, right? As far as, and use some different models on how to do this. And so one thing that has been wonderful to see, and now when I've had the great pleasure of moderating all of these, and I will introduce them to the participants now, and we say that really the theme really becomes its plot of the seminar. To practice these virtues and habits of disagreement with each other, because we talk about things like standpoint epistemology, for instance, and to what extent uh, 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 is how do we engage with that in the classroom, for instance? And we'll even have different, on the table, different perspectives as to what extent should virtue be an explicit part of the pedagogy rather than implicit. One of the co-instructors, a friend of mine, Teresa Bejan, for a couple of years ago, has written a book, Mere Civility, in which she really wants to argue too much virtue is a bad thing. It can get in the way of, can get away of shutting down conversation. That's why she says mere civility. And so there's a number of different, let's say, models to do this. But what we find is the practice as far as the way faculty have spoke to each other and then ultimately model that with the way you engage to your students is really important. And so the practice of virtues is there at this practical level. And that's the important thing, even if there's some slightly different theoretical models, right? In terms of how you would frame it. So I do think that it's important to model this for our students. I would also say here, we have a really important opportunity, those of us who are leaders in the institution, to be able to invite our alumni in, because students, they do look at their professors. Even more significant are other students. And also, depending on, there's some studies, if you study a study that Duke did a couple years ago, their communications office did, alumni even are more impactful, right, than professors. And so we have a great opportunity to be able to bring in to the classroom for panel conversations, let's say, alumni who practice civil discourse and civic education in their vocations in their spheres of influence. And that has been very, very powerful. When you are able to bring in, let's say, physicians or high school principals into the classroom, and they're able to speak about the ways in which questions like purpose and civil discourse, living out these virtues and values impact and shape their leadership and success within their organizations. That carries a lot of weight with students, and I think it's also a way of saying that as a university community, it's just not the faculty, but it's alumni, it's administrators. We all have a really important role to play in helping the universities live up to their potentials for preparing our citizens to flourish in a pluralistic democracy.
Great. The second question that emerged for me as you were talking is about where this sits in a university. So you have these workshops where folks come in and they develop either a new course on civil discourse or revamp an existing one. How do you mitigate against the fact that students are going to take 20, 30 courses, and there's a whole lot of discourse happening online, in their life, on television, and in every other class they take that is not civil? And so, how do you mitigate against that in the context of the work that you're doing? How do you have this be a transformative form of engagement?
Mhm. Well, wrestling with this question, Suzanne, is what led me to go into administration
Cool.
full time, be a full-time administrator. Uh, I love doing scholarship and teaching and writing books, and it's hard to move back from that, except for the fact that I was wrestling with this particular problem, and I realized that this problem requires an institutional solution that requires thinking institutionally and maneuvering resources around within a university. And it requires thinking about the fact that most of our students' lives are lived outside of the classroom. And so we have to be able to have fora for civil discourse that are public, but also in, let's say, places like the residential halls where students live, spend most of their time. And so that led me to work with residential life first at Duke and now at Carolina to be able to set up a civil discourse community in which we're empowering and giving students the agency to be able to have these conversations in the common rooms of their dorm. So having a budget in which they can be able to bring in speakers, collaborate with the professors to be able to bring in speakers that, let's say, come into the classroom, say a course on the democracy or the course on the good life, and the speaker comes into the classroom, but then comes into the common room or the dorm room with pizza and is able to chat with the students, right? So being able to reinforce those habits of conversation, so it's just not a one-off intervention in the classroom, but then also in the dormitory. And then I think you have to think programmatically and start thinking across sequences of courses, So can you have right now at the School of Civic Life and Leadership, we have a minor, which is 5 courses coming together to help students think about questions of purpose in the good life, to be able to think about questions such as the just society, to be able to develop the habits and skills of civil discourse, and then to be able to develop those capacities as a leader in a pluralistic democracy. So being able to think, and we'll move towards having a major, but being able to think about whether it's a minor, a certificate, a major, being able to think curricularly so you can begin to scaffold these courses with one another, and also be able to do it in such a way that students are beginning to see how it can benefit them in their careers as let's say a doctor or whatever else they may be doing, because there are some real benefits here. And of course, employers are looking for students who have these types of capacities and skills to come into their organization and join their team. So being able to draw these pathways out, to provide lots of opportunities inside and outside of the classroom, and then be able to message and signal to students the benefits, I think is part of a key strategy. One other thing that I'll say here, I think, which is really important, is there's some preliminary survey data that have been done, I mentioned purpose, but we found that students that participate in civil discourse programming activities, it correlates towards positive mental health. Outcomes. So students are less likely to be anxious, less likely to be lonely, more likely to have faculty as mentors, more likely to have friends with other people, and more likely to be secure in their own identities. And so I think, this is some work to be done as programs like ours, continue to grow and scale. But I do think that, when you think holistically about this approach, there's going to be some other benefits that come out of this for our students that are not just learning to be better citizens, but also some really positive mental health outcomes.
So that's great. One final question before we open it up to others for questions is about sort of how do you see this out in the world working? So I go to a number of community meetings, and they can often be kind of wild in the nature of uncivil discourse. Um, how do you see this right in the world? And how do you know that this education, with the myriad of benefits that you've described, is actually working? When you see a student a decade from now, how do you say to yourself, yep, that worked?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think one thing to say is it's important that this does move out into our society. There's uh, uh, I think it was Andrew Sullivan that said, we all live on campus now, and he meant at that time it was a negative thing. But I think one way in which you see it work is you say, well, we all live on campus now, and it's a positive thing, right? Because the people that are going out, let's say in school board meetings, are able to have conversations across difference that lead to productive outcomes. We've tried this. I teamed up with the School of Government here at Carolina, and Dean Amy Wall. John Rose and a member of her team put together for the first time in the 50 years or so that they've been doing the orientation for first year legislators, a civil discourse part to it. So we had a bipartisan group of first year freshman legislators that did some of the things that we did with faculty, and having food as part of it, but then also doing some of the exercises, first principles, and then also again going to the playing with ideas. So labeling an exercise that we sometimes do in classes or out on the quad. Sometimes I call this my Socratic field games because we do it sort of on the quad. And you ask them a question, and then you have to say, do you agree, disagree, strongly disagree? Well, we did that with the legislators. And we started off with some easier ones. We got to some harder ones, even some contentious ones. And what we found was they didn't want to stop. They just wanted to keep going because they were having fun. We started to see that just some really interesting ways in which you had to give an explanation for why you were where you were, and the idea is to get people to move around and change their mind, because that means you're listening, that means you're thinking. And we got to see our legislators do that and exhibit that in a really strong and powerful way. And that makes me think that this is the type of skill that can go out into our community and to be able to change and let's say make better the type of discourse that we have towards one another, which means that we're going to end up having better solutions to our democratic and political challenges. And so I would love to see in the future, is this succeeding? When you look around, let's say the state of North Carolina, you see judges and teachers and lawyers and doctors, all living lives of purpose that are able to connect with others across difference, and then because the university is being attributed to that, the confidence in university levels are rising again, such as they've been in decline. I think that would be a wonderful metric for success.
That's great. I love that you're sort of expanding beyond the university context. Really great. So I want to tee up some of the questions that are rolling in. The first one, unfortunately, diversity, a word you use, is being punished in many ways at university. Is there an opportunity for academic leadership to use their skills in civic discourse to reach consensus and work to ensure academic freedom. So how do you think about this in the context of current university conversations?
Yeah.
Maybe would be a way to put that.
Yeah. Well, I think again, the hallmark and center of the university is truth seeking, and so it's the idea of of aiming for uh, providing all members of the community with the opportunity and ability to to be able to pursue the truth and to be able to discover that together. And so, I think that something that's really important for academic leaders in times of challenge is to keep that mission forward. I think it can be very easy to if you lose sight of that mission, to move in one direction or another. And if you do lose sight of the mission, then what happens? You start to lose trust if people see that you're giving up on the mission. So I think, one thing that's really important is for the integrity of the universities, for academic leaders to be focused on the mission. I do think it's really important, ultimately, I think for the universities as we begin to produce citizens. Certainly, there's a short-term concerns, but I really think about the next 40 years, and what is it going to be like as a society as we're able to send, citizens, as we're able to send out policymakers, leaders into our society who have these types of capacities to be able to think productively across differences, so that we're able to consider a lot of different options to the problems that are facing us today. And so I think keeping that sort of front and center and that possibility front and center, I think is really important. I would also say too something that's a lot of the work that really became energized that I've done in this space came out of COVID, in which there was a time in which uh, people felt stuck. And not a lot of hope. And I think one thing that's important in times of contention, in which there might even be a sense of hopelessness, is not to give into that, and to work together, and you might even say a sense of democratic hope, that through conversation, hanging in there with one another, thinking constructively together, keep staying mission forward, we're able to work out constructively together, such that the universities are going to be seen as something that's going to be valuable to all members of our society. So those are a couple of my thoughts.
Great, thank you. Next question. It seems to me that a prerequisite for civil discourse is a presumption of good faith amongst the parties. That is, we may not agree, but we are in sincere, gosh, let me just get this one back. But we are sincere in what we say, and we seek broadly similar ends. In other words, a search for mutual understanding and not tribal power. Today, that often seems absent at a national level when even empirical facts cannot be agreed upon. How do we even begin to break that cycle? That's a big one for you, Jed.
That is a big question. First of all, I want to affirm that first thing that the speaker said, right? There is something about acting in goodwill. And that's one of the principles that certainly I mentioned John Rose, and who is one of the leaders of the summer seminar, and that's the first thing he'll say. You got to assume goodwill in for the other person, and of course uh, and that's important for building up trust. It's important for understanding that the other person isn't evil, let's say. And that's a huge challenge. And it's a huge challenge today because a study of a few years ago said that the majority of Republicans and Democrats think that members of the outgroup are immoral. Right, which means that you're acting in bad faith. There's something wrong with them, and so that makes civil discourse very, 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 very challenging. Uh, I think the way forward is, number one, and this is where the university has such an important role, is to be able to take communities that we're finding at a place like Carolina, at a place like Notre Dame, that do have a diverse group of the population, and begin to, in the classrooms, in conversations outside of the classrooms, begin to practice and be able to see some of the fruits of this mode of thinking at a smaller level. It's very hard for me to be able to imagine a citizen of North Carolina, all of the details of somebody, let's say across the country. But it becomes easier in a local community, right, to be able to build that trust with one another. I will also say that I think that politics is particularly challenging because at the end of the day, politics is about power. And civil discourse asks us to say that it's not all reducible simply to power. And so I think one of the solutions to this is being able to put politics in its proper place, to understand that it's about trade-offs. It's about it can't be if it's the only thing that gives us meaning, and our politics become a contest over meaning ultimately, and value and identity, then it's going to be really hard to compromise and lose. And so being able to have other goods outside of the political goods that are important goods, and be able to put politics in its place as something that's very important, but also something that is not the ultimate. I think that's a very helpful for being able to make some trade-offs in this, this political sphere, even as from the community up, we begin to build relationships with others.
Great. So we probably only have time for one more question, and there are a whole bunch teed up. So my apologies to those folks excited to jump in. But there are a couple about the K-12 space and about how we do this work outside of the university environment. Maybe it's in secondary education or K-12 more broadly. Do you have any hints, tips, thoughts, or ideas there?
Yeah, well, I think that again, I mean, a couple things. I mean, number one, I think that we need to be able to have some people that have thought about this in the network, best practices, be able to have some opportunities to be able to get those to K through 12, and especially I would say those in 11th and 12th grade, as you have students that are getting ready to transition to the university. But I also do think that I think the high school level is an important space for this because in the community college is an important space for this because I think it's really important, Suzanne, that we not, I mean, this is still being tested, let's say, so this is a hypothesis, but there's one way of thinking about this that says, oh, civil discourse is just a problem of the elite trying to figure out, what is acceptable and what is not among the elite professional class. And what I have found in speaking to, let's say, people at community colleges and even in the K through 12 space is actually this is uh, uh, something that impacts us all as citizens and as fellow citizens. And so I think that it's really important to begin to build some networks, let's say at the high school level, that take advantage of the full challenges of our citizens and our different communities to be able to prepare them for conversations across difference. And so it's going to be, it really is going to be building, building on some of the best practices that we've learned at the university level and be able to equip those at the K through 12 level, especially in high school, to be able to do this work. And as I think about, like the next 5-10 years of the School of Civic Life and Leadership, certainly that's one of the things that my team and I are going to be thinking about. And there's others in this space too that have been beginning to think about this. But I think when you start thinking about a civic education at the high school level, this is going to be part of it because again, uh, well, and I'll say one other thing too on this. Another opportunity that we do have is for those of us who are at universities that educate our teachers, having opportunities to have certificates in civil discourse, right, for our students for our teachers who are going to go into education at the K through 12 level. So this is a way, again, to be able to give them the confidence in the skills and the ability and the capacities, even during their training in education as teachers to then be able to transition into the classroom. So those are a couple of things, building some networks and some educational opportunities, continuing education opportunities, let's say for our high school teachers, while also doing some things at the college level for the training in education of our high school teachers so that they can hit the ground running as they go into the classroom.
Great. So, Jed, this has been extraordinary, right? You're doing so many things in your inaugural work as dean. Uh, is there something as we close that you're most excited about in this plethora of all these kinds of initiatives and opportunities that you're creating? That you're like, this is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, uh, it, I think what I'm most excited about is beginning to see an ecosystem emerge,
Yeah.
an ecosystem of that we represent and many others, right? And Dean Cunningham and starting to see people from very different universities, private, religious, private, public, community college, because I think that the challenges before us as a democracy are going to be met through higher education when we're all working together at different parts of the ecosystem, meeting different parts and different needs of our citizen body. And so I think as we begin to build these networks and functions as an ecosystem, I think we're going to have some really great results, and payback and investment and return on our taxpayers' dollars. And what I really get excited about is the fact that we're starting to have an ecosystem of practitioners from very different institutions across the country, that are working in their own spheres, but also beginning to collaborate and exchange notes and to cheer each other on and help one another with their success. I'm most excited about that.
Well, that's great. So, and we so appreciate your leadership in this ecosystem. I also appreciate you had imagined having a broader conversation with Dean Cunningham. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to hop on with us today. So I love that you were able to carry on with us in this. So thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for spending their lunch hour with us today. And please join us on Monday, May 12th with Daniel Potterfield, the president and CEO of the Aspen Institute, on why mindset matters. Thank you, Jed. This was really a delight. And thank you again for the beautiful essay.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Be good.